The other story that I wanted to kind of round out with is something I'm especially close with, and that is more of a real estate related story.
Okay, and I wonder why you'd be more interested in that.
Well, that's because that's my career. That's what
There
I've
you
chosen
go.
to do with my life is real estate in many different forms. But at the moment, it means helping people as an agent and eventually as a broker to really just connect buyers and sellers. And it's a really complicated process, but it's also very rewarding. And other people have chosen to do real estate for their careers, but in a different way. And one of the ways you can make real estate a career is doing renovations. So instead of moving to a new house, you would kind of change the one you already have, right?
Yep.
And this is really interesting to me as someone who focuses a lot on investments and economics and finance. There's many indicators that can kind of give you a finger on the pulse. Like when someone's brought into the ambulance, AJ, when someone's brought in the ambulance, you check for a pulse
Okay.
to see how the patient is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And real estate is much the same. You have to check the pulse once in a while to see how the real estate market is functioning. And a lot of people just focus on price. But that's just one thing. That would be like just checking the pulse, and the patient has a giant gash in their head, and you go, seems fine, his pulse is good. So like there's many different indicators.
Yeah.
And one of them is the rate at which renovations are happening in the community. Because like I said, you don't always want to move to a new house. Sometimes you just want to change the space that you're already in.
Mm-hmm.
And that does have an effect on the real estate market too. So apparently business is booming for construction companies and home renovation companies. And even MPAC, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Company, some people really lean into MPAC and use them for all sorts of market data, shows a 4% increase in permitting across Northern Ontario. And if you're like me, you kind of take those numbers with a grain of salt because permits they're not like a perfect indicator, but they are an indicator of when work is being done, because not all things need to be permitted.
Unless it comes to oil in the United States, which is a whole other thing altogether. But yeah, no, the permits means these are the jobs that are in the queue kind of thing. They want to start construction. They've gone as far as to get a permit. So yeah, so that's an indicator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the article on CTV talks about how some communities have seen 20% dips in renovations, but ours is really, really strong. And people have really decided, I'm going to stay in the same house, but I'm going to upgrade it. I'm going to bring things up to standard, to modern standard. Now, supply chain kind of plays a lot into that, because if you can't get the required materials that you need, the renovation can't go forward. It's one of those things that it's really reliant on the supply chain. So, things becoming more expensive means that the whole process is going to become more expensive as well. And that means the waiting times have gotten longer and longer, which, if you're thinking from a business perspective, that's not necessarily a bad thing for renovation companies. If they have clients queued up, like ready to go one after another, they really benefit from that.
Well, that's another reason why when I sold my house, I could have done it on my own. I could have.
Sure.
There are tools out there for people to do things on their own. However, you just kind of demonstrated so much, and I know you're going to continue with it, but you're demonstrating that when you have an expert, though, that understands all of the blind spots and the a bird's eye view of what's going on, it would really, you can benefit a lot more. And I did. I know by using a professional to sell my house, I benefited way more and way less headache. Mm-hmm. So it was worth the little bit of the commission I had. And so this is the importance of somebody who understands the whole market and not just looking at, like you said, taking the pulse of someone who has a gash in their head kind of thing.
Exactly.
Looking at the real estate market, right?
Exactly. And I'm more of to kind of transition. We can come back to the renovations in this article on CTV, but I'm more of a creative thinker. Like, I've always been someone really interested in the creative aspects of anything, whether it's real estate or anything else. I'm thinking, how can we kind of optimize this? How can we get it to the right position? And one of the things I've been thinking about recently is because markets go through cycles, real estate is especially cyclical because it takes so long to build a place. It could take years from the beginning of the permitting process. The market doesn't always respond the way you'd expect it to, given those stimuli. So, like right now, I've been looking at vacancy rates, like residential vacancy rates. They're 0. When you rent out a place, you'll have many, many people interested in renting the place.
Yep.
That's an indicator, just like the Pulse example I gave before, that's an indicator that there's not enough housing. So usually when this happens, a market cycle, you would see an increase in permits. You'd see an increase in people wanting to build because if vacancy is low, the risk is very low, and they want to build something, get renters in there, start making a profit, or sell the place. Because vacancy goes, to 0, that means your property value goes up because again, there's not enough property. Doesn't always happen that way though. Like the sequence of events doesn't always happen that way, and there's many reasons for that. But this time, this market cycle, it didn't happen. And yet another finger on the pulse of real estate is new building. They're called housing starts. It's when a house is actually started, like breaking ground. And you can look up these statistics. CMHC website, Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, and you can look every month. Do you know what CMHC stands for?
Define the acronym, which is good.
Many people won't
everyone's
know
heard
that
of CMHC, right? They know that's.
I don't think so.
Well, if you bought a house in the last 20 years, you should. But
yeah. It's kind of like Canada's Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. The United States has an equivalent program. Ours is much, much smaller than theirs. But anyway, so they release data on how many housing starts each month are done in each of the major cities in Canada. And Sudbury is on that list. So if you want to see, are people building more houses than the demand in Sudbury? Go to those numbers. And from what I can tell, not by a long shot. So people that are saying the housing market has to crash or it has to have a serious correction, I just have to disagree. The fundamentals just don't agree with that opinion. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but it's not because of the fundamentals. It will be because of psychological, reasons if the market has a correction. And this renovation story that we read is just a perfect indicator of that. People are saying one thing, saying, "Oh, the market's going to crash. It's a terrible time to buy real estate." But they're doing another thing, which is I'm renovating my house, I'm increasing the value, maybe taking money out in the form of like a line of credit or something. So you really have to follow what people are doing, not what they're saying. Yeah,
very smart, actually. So follow what people are doing, not what they're saying. And there's Zach Ireland giving it an industry overview, which, again, is the reason why you use a professional. It's like anything. You surround yourself with people who know things about things you don't, and then that way you can benefit from that knowledge. It's a pretty simple principle.